Hi, I'm Danielle Bassoni with Time for Change Kitchen. Today we are going to make the most fabulous barbecue sauce in the world, and if I do say so myself. One of the things I want to mention before we get started is how important it is to have your ingredients in place. In culinary terms, this is called mise en place, which means literally setting in place. One chef that I listened to at one point said that he thinks of it as his mess in place, and I think that's a very apt description. It's important because there are a lot of ingredients in this recipe, but don't let that scare you away, because this is really quite easy to make. You just need to have everything in place and ready to go when you need it. And so that's what we've done here, and I'll show you step by step how to make this, and you'll find that it's just the easiest thing in the world. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to turn this on, is we're going to saute our vegetables. We have here a bowl of chopped onions, and these can be chopped any way you want it. This is coarsely chopped, which is fine because we're going to be pureeing all of this, so it really doesn't matter what it looks like in this dish. This is about 3 cups of chopped onion. It is roughly 1 very large onion or 2 medium onions, but it measures out to be 3 cups. And we're not really caramelizing this. We're going to cook this until it's translucent. And because all of these vegetables in here are going to be basically translucent or cooked till they're soft, we're just going to put them all in the pan at the same time. This is roughly 3/4 of a cup of chopped bell pepper. It is the size of a medium bell pepper. And it's important when you're buying peppers of any kind, even if you're using powdered peppers, to get organic, because they are very high in pesticide residues, and hot peppers in particular even have neurotoxins that can be damaging to the formative brains of our children. So it's important to try to use organic ingredients if you can. We have about 2 stalks of celery, which is about 1/2 cup. It can be 3/4 of a cup if your celery stalks are big. And these are 3 cloves of smashed garlic. Okay, now we also have here about a medium red bell pepper that has been roasted, and this makes about 1/2 cup. We're going to add that at the end. We also have 1 tablespoon. This is the zest of 1/2 an orange, or about 1 tablespoon. And we'll add that in after this is sauteed, because there's no reason to saute that. So I'm going to move this aside a little bit right now and talk to you about these spices. And we'll just keep an eye on this. Now let me point out that you see how this bottom of the pan is starting to brown. We are going to keep a little dish of water on hand, and we will use that to pull up some of this caramelization without actually steaming our vegetables. And then we'll push the vegetables on top of that, and that will pull the caramelization off the pan and onto the vegetables without really steaming the vegetables. In this pan, in this application, it doesn't really matter if we steam the vegetables, because basically we're just cooking them in their own juices and allowing them to steam themselves. And it's not important to the finished product whether these are caramelized or not. Okay, so while this is cooking, and I'm going to turn this down a little bit, we're going to talk about spices. Normally, what I would have you do is take each spice out of its container and dump it directly into a bowl until you have all the spices you need. But because I want to show you the individual spices, I'm going to, I have them already measured out, and then we'll just put them in the bowl as if we were taking them individually out of their respective containers. This is a 1/4 cup of ground cloves. This is a 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric. Next to garlic, turmeric is one of our most helpful spices. And but it's interesting to note that in order to receive those health properties of turmeric, you have to add black pepper, because it increases the bioavailability of turmeric 2,000%. So this is a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper for this recipe. We're using a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and I use Ceylon cinnamon as opposed to cassia cinnamon, because cassia cinnamon, if overused, can be toxic to your liver, whereas Ceylon cinnamon is not. If you only have cassia cinnamon, that's fine. You have to use quite a bit of it for it to be liver toxic, but I always err on the side of safety, and I actually prefer the taste of the Ceylon cinnamon. So this is starting to soften and look really nice, and it smells wonderful. Okay, we have a 1/2 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. If you do not like cayenne pepper, and if you do not like your food spicy, then you can reduce this to a 1/4 teaspoon, or not use it at all. I like it. I like my food spicy, and with this particular recipe, what a 1/2 teaspoon will do is it will give you a little bit of a spicy aftertaste in the back of your throat, which I think is perfect, and which a lot of people agree with. But some people think it's very spicy, which I simply don't understand, but I really like spice. So we're adding, but my point is, if you are hesitant about using spice, sneak up on it. Add a 1/4 teaspoon first, and if that's spicy enough for you, then leave it at that. Or add before you add a 1/2 teaspoon. You can always add to this recipe, but you cannot take away. I'm just scraping some of this caramelization onto the vegetables. Okay, we have a tablespoon of granulated garlic, and we have, this is the secret ingredient, this is a tablespoon of cocoa powder. And we have a tablespoon of southwestern chili powder. Now this is a blend. This is not just straight chilies. This has got paprika and onion and garlic and some other types of peppers in it, but it's not very spicy at all. But it does add a lot of flavor. But I call it Southwest chili powder for lack of a better name for it. It's the same powder you use when you're making chili. Okay, so you see how much caramelization. It's time to put a little bit of water onto that, because this is just before scorching time. And so you move the vegetables away from the spot that you're adding this, and you let most of it evaporate, and then you move your vegetables onto it, and that pulls that caramelization right onto your vegetables and gives it a little bit of a sweeter flavor than if you strictly saute it with, just until it's translucent. This is much easier to do in a large pan like this. And the reason we're using this water is because we don't want to use oil. Oil is not a healthy ingredient to add to food. I don't care what kind of oil it is. And this allows us to have these wonderful caramelized color and flavor without damaging having any damaging to our endothelial cells or to or adding weight, you know, unnecessary calories. We're sneaking right up on this. We're adding very little water. This is like a teaspoon at a time. I started with a cup of water and I still have almost a cup of water. But you just keep moving it around. It smells great. By the way, onions, bell pepper, and celery are part of what the Cajuns call the Holy Trinity of Cajun cooking. This is not a Cajun dish, but just so you know. It's thickening up, and I'm going to add a little bit and let it just steam a little bit in this water. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add my roasted red peppers. And I'll have a separate video on how to roast peppers if you don't know how to do that. I actually roast my peppers I buy my peppers at the farmer's market in July or August, usually the first week of August. And then I roast them and freeze them, and then I have them all year long. And they hold up very well to this type of freezing, and you get them at the best price. Right now, they're close to $3 a piece in the grocery store, which to me is crazy. You can get them much, much cheaper when they're in season. And again, these are organically grown. And I'm going to add this orange zest. And we don't worry about mincing this because, again, this is going to be blended. Oh my goodness, I wish you could smell this. It's wonderful. And I'm going to turn this off, and we're going to set this aside to cool. Now, you may have seen me before. This is a terrible habit. If you want to shake things off your spoon, do it this way. I prefer to cook with a wooden spoon but frankly, because of that habit, and you can really ding up the edges of your pot. You can actually ruin your pressure cookers by tapping the edges with a metal spoon. So I try not to use those, and I try to stay away from plastic completely if I can, to the best of my ability. Okay, I'm going to take this off of here, and I'm going to set this on a granite counter to cool because that will cool quickly. And we'll be back in a minute with step 2, which is using the blender to puree the rest of our ingredients. Okay, so we're back. We are going to puree some of the ingredients first, and then we'll put them back into our pan and finish cooking. To begin with, we are going to puree. Let's do the tomatoes first. Now, I use my own tomatoes. I do not like buying things out of the can, and I spend probably 2 or 3 days a year canning my own tomatoes, and it's absolutely worth it. And I will be doing a video on how to do that very soon. But if you don't have your own canned tomatoes and you want to use canned tomatoes, this is a pretty good brand. It's Muir Glen. This is more than you need for this recipe. You can use a 14.5 ounce can, and that's just fine. I'm using 16 ounces just because that's the size I use, and it's perfectly fine as well. But 14.5 can is fine. I also use, they also have a 6 ounce can. You want to get organic if you can. A 6 ounce can of tomato paste is in order. And again, I make my own. And so these are 4 ounces, and they are not as thick as the commercially prepared tomato paste, but it's the way I like it. And so you can either make your own, which I will show you, or you can use a 6 ounce can of commercially prepared tomato paste. I'm going to end up using 8 ounces of the one that I've prepared, which is more like the texture of a thick ketchup. And I find that it's very useful to have. And I rarely use such a concentrated tomato paste. So we'll put 2 of these in here. And I've already broken the seal, so I did that earlier. And we want to get it, every bit of it, because it's just wonderful. This is so easy to do, and it's so worth doing. You know, if you pour this onto a spatula, it keeps it from splashing so badly. Little tip. Okay. And we are going to add to this a 1/2 cup of unsulfured molasses, and this is also organic. This recipe is a little bit spicy and a little bit sweet when you're finished with it. And it's absolutely, completely delicious. Okay. This is a 1/3 cup of organic brown sugar. This is light brown sugar. You can use dark if you want. And a 1/3 cup of apple cider vinegar. And this particular one is Bragg's, and it's organic as well. Organic ingredients are more expensive, but it's just so worth it. And when you think in terms of medical bills, it's not as expensive as you might imagine. Okay, so whenever I'm using a high-powered blender, any kind of high-powered equipment in my kitchen, such as my grain mill or my Vitamix, I always wear earplugs, because when you lose your hearing, it's gone, so you may as well protect it. And I keep my earplugs in a little container under my kitchen sink, and it's always there when I need them. So that's a nice puree. You can always check with your Vitamix, you can check your puree just by looking at the wand to see how smooth it is. By the way, you're more than welcome to use your home blender, just a regular kitchen blender. It may not hold enough, and so you may have to do it in 2 batches, but it's perfectly fine in this recipe. In some recipes, you can't do it with a home blender, but this one's perfectly fine. So now we are going to add the spices. You just dump them all in. And I'm going to start this on low without the wand in, so that it doesn't get all over the wand. That's good enough. And so now we are going to add the vegetables that we just sauteed. Now I have transferred these vegetables to a bowl just to make it easier to put into this Vitamix rather than trying to wield that pan. But I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, these are not hot, they're warm, and that's fine. And that you can put them in hot. This machine is made to work with hot ingredients. I just don't particularly like doing that. I like things in plastic. Regardless of how safe the plastic is purported to be, I prefer not to mix my food in hot or even freezing. Any extreme in temperature when it involves plastic. Okay, so we are going to blend this very well. So if necessary, scrape your bowl down to get all of the ingredients in there, being pureed. We always start at low temperature and then low speed. So this is the level of puree that I like. This is a personal preference. If you prefer your sauce chunky, then don't puree it as much. I like mine rather smooth because then I can use it in all kinds of different applications. Okay. So now we'll transfer this back to our pot and cook it for a few minutes and it's done. Okay, so we're back. I'm using the same pan that we started with. I did not bother to clean it because there's some good flavor in there. And we are going to add our barbecue sauce back to it. When you're working with a Vitamix, just giving it an extra shake or two will get most of the sauce away from the blades, and you can scrape it out easily. You can also add a little water in it and blend it again, and get it out that way as well. And we probably will be adding a little water back to this, so that would be a good solution. However, I've gotten most of it out, so I'm not going to do that. Okay. This is already starting to bubble, and we are going to turn this down to fairly low and just let this simmer at a low simmer for about 15 minutes, and then this is done. And we'll come back and taste it. We are going to scrape some of these, this sauce, caramelization that was in the pan. We're going to scrape that back into the sauce because that's very good flavor. You don't want to lose that. This will make about 5.5 cups, and this freezes very well. You can put it in, oops, turn that down to a lower setting, and I'm doing just what I say not to do. But I'm going to put a lid on this because I don't want to be splashed all over the place. And we will come back in about 15 minutes, but in the interim, every few minutes we'll come back and stir it to make sure nothing is sticking to the bottom. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, and I've periodically been stirring it to make sure it doesn't scorch, and I just wanted to show you, this is about the temperature we want to be cooking it at, so that it's simmering fairly fast, but not so much that it's going to scorch it or that it's going to splash all over the place. We'll give this another 5 minutes and then we'll be done. Hi, I'm back. It's been about 15 minutes and this is bubbling. I can hear it. And we will see how it looks. This is perfect. I've stirred it several times during those 15 minutes we were cooking it. And I've turned it on. I'm going to turn it off now because we are done. I do want to check it, taste it to check it for seasoning. This is really good. It has a little hint of an orange flavor. It's a little sweet, and it has just enough spice to notice it at the back of your throat. So it's just perfect. So now you know how to make the best barbecue sauce in the world, in my opinion. You can freeze this. You can put it in your refrigerator for up to 2 weeks, or you can use it fresh in any recipe that requires barbecue sauce. You can also use it as a tangy ketchup. I'm Danielle Bissoni, reminding you to enjoy whole foods for whole health.